not only should people who are faster and smarter be more productive, especially if they're hardworking, but that's really what you'd want, isn't it? I mean, how the hell do you want to set up your society? You want to set up your society so that incompetent people who do nothing succeed? So, you know, Silicon Valley tends to be liberal. Everyone knows that. And the reason for that is that there's a tremendous number of entrepreneurs there. And entrepreneurs tend to be high in openness and lower in conscientiousness. So they're creative, but they're also willing to break rules, you know, which you kind of have to do often. Hopefully not to a criminal extent, but you have to, well, you know, it's tricky when you're trying to establish something new, because look at a company like Uber, you know, they had to bend the rules to be successful. And those companies that have rented those scooters out and put them on the streets everywhere, you know, they just kind of went ahead and did it. It's not something an orderly person would do, because they'd ask for permission, whereas the people who started these scooter rental companies just said, well, what'll happen if we put them everywhere? And the answer was, that seemed to work. But, you know, you have to have a rule-breaking proclivity in order to manage that. You know, sometimes things are changing so fast that everybody's knocked off their feet and things are falling apart. And sometimes things are so rigid that there isn't any new water flowing and everything's ground to a halt. You see that in corporations very often, where they get ossified, you know, and there's no new ideas, and then they collapse. You know, the average Fortune 500 company only lasts, I think now it's only 24 years, and the duration of their occupation of the top Fortune 500 space is getting shorter and shorter every year. You need liberals, because now and then the right thing to do is to come up with something new. And you need conservatives, because now and then the right thing to do is to do what everybody has always done. And the reason you need political dialogue is so that the liberals and the conservatives can continue to argue about which of those solutions is appropriate right now. I think there is a certain danger in luxury. You know, we don't know how necessary a certain degree of privation is to motivation. You know, the typical first generation immigrant story is someone arrives with nothing and is motivated fully to do whatever is necessary to make either themselves or their children a success. And that does seem to decline. That motivation does seem to decline somewhat over the following generations. There's plenty of reason to be optimistic if you're inclined in that direction. I would say it's best to marry that with a healthy dose of attentive caution, because, well, as I said, things can go badly wrong. But I can't think of a time in the past that I would trade for now, despite all the problems that are also part and parcel of being alive now. Speaking on a global level, there's never been a better time for the majority of people to be alive. And the future, although we're vulnerable and terrible things can always happen to us, it's hard to make a case that the future doesn't look comparatively positive. We're becoming extremely technologically sophisticated, and the world is changing at an incredibly rapid rate, and the only way we're going to be able to manage that in a positive way is if each of us, or as many of us as possible, are capable of making wise and careful and truthful decisions. And if we do that, then, you know, maybe things can continue to improve. The rate of absolute poverty in the world has fell by 50% between the year 2000 and the year 2012. You know, that's the fastest rate of economic improvement in the history of the world, and there's plenty of reason to be optimistic. When you're talking to people, they'll be thinking about what they have to say that's worse, and that's not helpful if you need a listening ear. I should say that I'm very aware of the unfairness of a meritocratic society, of its intrinsic unfairness. So let me give you an example. I had someone write me the other day. He had listened to some of my lectures on IQ, and he sent me his IQ scores. And he was in the 5th percentile, which basically meant that 95% of the people around him were faster cognitively than he was. And, you know, the the letter it wasn't very grammatically correct, and it wasn't very well written, although it was very sad. And he said that he had a very difficult time finding a job and keeping one, that he was constantly frustrated and unnerved. And that's a terrible thing, you know, because it's not as if it's his fault. A lot of what constitutes your innate cognitive ability, or your cognitive ability, is something that's really granted to you by fortune and fate. And I mean, you can make someone stupider, but it's very difficult to make someone smarter, although hard work definitely is a plus. People stack up at the bottom, and it's not easy to figure out how to deal with that, but because you need the people who are leading the cognitive revolutions to develop entrepreneurial enterprises and to run things properly and to invent the new things that we all use, and hopefully to raise the living standards of society in general. Put your lives together so you can make good decisions.